Recording in progress. That's good.
Oh, good evening. Hello. Good day.
Hello, everybody. Oh my God, the numbers are going up already.
Numbers are going up. Numbers are going up. Here they come, whizzing in. I'm just trying to see. Oh, participants. Here they are. Here they all turn up. Look, where's my chat? My chat. Say hello as you arrive. Give a thumbs up. Tell us where you're watching from. Are you in the UK? Are you in Europe? Are you in America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand? Whereabouts are you? Bermuda! That was typical. Brilliant. Tonya is from Bermuda. Janice, Nova Scotia in Canada. Oh, God, I love it, don't you? I just love it. Margaret's here. Hello, Margaret. Hello from Devon, UK. 80 Scarverland, I hope I've said that correct. Probably not, because I haven't got a Norwegian accent. From Norway, Lucy Tribe is here. Hello, UK, currently in the Wirral. Ooh, on holiday. Lena Maritz, I hope I've said that all right. South Africa. They're coming in from all over today, Garry. Absolutely everywhere.
Lord. No pressure, no pressure.
No pressure, no pressure. Mandy's coming in from the Isle of Portland in UK. Oh, you know Portland, don't you? Or do you know Portland? No, you don't. What am I talking about? I'm talking about something else.
Know Portland.
I don't know what I'm on about. Bev's here from Cornwall. Therese is here from Sweden. Hello.
Hi, Therese.
Tanya says she loves Nova Scotia. Crystal's here from Texas, USA. Jack's from Anzo in California. Brilliant. We've got loads coming in from absolutely everywhere. Rachel's here. Big hands. Welcome. Hello. Poppy from Wales. It's Poppy. Okay. Tegan from Wiltshire. So some of you will know some of you will know us. I am Lindsay Setchell, and this is
Garry Hinton.
It is.
How are you? Hope you're doing well.
I'm going to spotlight. Oh, look, I've spotlighted you. I'm going to spotlight me as well.
You don't want a close up of me.
Yeah, I'm added now. So when we speak, it shouldn't swap between the two of us. But Zoom does funny things, so it just might do that anyway.
It'll be what it'll be.
It'll just be what it'll be. So welcome everybody to our. I don't know how many of these webinars we've done so far.
I've lost count.
How many have we done?
I've lost count.
Lost count.
But there's more to come.
There's been a few, and there's quite a lot more to come. Tonya says, I was going to say that. You needed to point the other way.
Oh.
I don't know which way. On my screen, he's that way.
On my screen, she's that way. It might be different for you.
It might be, especially if you're viewing on a mobile. So we've got all kinds of webinars that if you go to the website, you'll find free to watch. And I know I've recognized quite a few names here, so I know that quite a few have been watching them. And from this one onwards, we've got a few more coming up, which we can talk about a bit later on. So the way it all works is, if you've been to a Zoom before, we do a whole presentation, and you can pop stuff in the chat. Make sure that when you're chatting that you send your message to everyone. Otherwise, we all won't see it. Only some people will see it. Garry might be observing what's going on in the hands up and all of that. So because I can see that Tegan's got her hand up. Is that because you want to say something, Tegan? or is it just you're saying hello? Probably just saying hello. So that's basically how it works. And we'll try and see your comments as we go up and down. Right, now, Bev says on my screen, Gary's on the top.
Let's just move on from that, shall we?
Thanks, Bev. You made me read that out loud, Bev. You made me read that. It's not funny. She'd be laughing now. She's giggling. Right. All right. Should we? I'm going to just get on with it then. Shall we? I'm just going to share my screen so that we can see. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, all good. All good.
Lovely job. Lovely job. Right. So we are the Hoofing Marvellous International School of Horse and Hoof Care, HMIS, and we are putting on these free webinars. I'm Lindsay Setchell, this is Garry Hinton, and we do look, I have to say, better in our avatars than we do in real life.
Here, speak for yourself.
I knew you were going to say that. Speak for yourself. We just slurp a coffee. Okay. Now we're in July. We're bombing along. Where has this year gone? We're bombing along. July. Now that means there's lots of celebrations going on around the world. I'm there because it was Bastille Day in France yesterday, and there were a lot. Oh no, yesterday, day before, wasn't it? But yet there was
Friday.
Yeah, fireworks have been going off all over the place, even local to us. And last year I was in Bastille Day in Paris, and it was incredible watching all. We were around the Eiffel Tower, watching the Eiffel Tower do this incredible thing, and they have people singing and all the lights on the Eiffel Tower doing lots of different shows. Oh, it was just amazing. I can't even explain it properly. So we had Bastille Day, but also in America they had 4th of July, didn't they? That's you there, dressed up in I don't even dressed up in it. It'd be quite funny to see you.
I think I'm just here for the abuse. I'm sure of it.
I think you are. It's hilarious. Right, where's my chat? Let me put that up there so that I can see chat happening as well. La 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 la. Mark Doty's here. Hello, Mark. All right. So who are we? We are HMIS. If you've watched these webinars before, you can quickly go and make yourself a cup of coffee while we're doing this. Hoofing Marvellous International School of Horse and Hoof Care. And we teach naturally balanced horse and hoof care. Not just about hooves. It's not just about the feet. We go further than that because we teach about the gut and the horse and ethology and species specific and species appropriate and all of that sort of thing. That's what we do. That's why we're talking about forage tonight. Where do we do it? Well, now, thank goodness, we do it all over the world, mainly because of popular demand, isn't it, Garry? Popular demand.
Oh, yes. And I think just by seeing where everybody's coming from on the webinar tonight, I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
And we also get an awful lot of people who see these webinars, they can't watch it on the night, and then they come back and they watch them again and again and again. People register for it on demand, and we will send out the link at the end, as we always do, on the next day when we get the recording from Zoom. So we teach it free through our webinars, but we also teach it through our courses, which you do have to pay a little bit of money for. But moving on. So the in-person workshops, we have just finished a whopping in-person workshop in Cornwall, UK. Oh, it's one of the biggest we've ever done, I think. We had well over 35 people there, all in all. It was fun, wasn't it, Garry?
It was, and what a lovely bunch of people. It's been a while since we've been down to Cornwall, because that's where you were based, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we thought they got fed up with you, but they haven't.
Cheeky. Yeah. Before I left.
Yes, it was very full on, and we had some amazing some of our HMB Pro students that came to join us, so they were helping with the teaching, and we all had an absolute ball. And lots of people went home to make their horses' lives for the better, which was desired result. Desired result.
That's what we're here for. And we did say to those that came on the in-person workshop that they can also now see, well, it's not really just the workshop that's online now, is it? We've put all kinds of bits and bobs online.
No, it's much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've been tweaking it. We've got a few people that joined when we opened it way back in March and April. Bless them. They got through half of it, and then we shut it down because we weren't happy with it. But it is coming back in a vengeance very soon. I keep saying that, and it will some point in the next, I don't know, 10 years or so. No, it'll be
it'll be before that. It'll be before that.
It'll be before that. So we teach in person and we teach online through courses. We've got ebooks, we've got all kinds of things. And talking about our courses, One of our very popular, easy to access 2-series courses is called the Hoof Uncovered, and it's a set of pre-recorded webinars that takes you right the way through the hoof. It's a journey through the hoof. It's really interesting. We talk about all different aspects of the hoof and hoof care. It's a 10-part video series, but we've split it into two series. So you get 5 in the first one and 5 in the next one. And we often have offers with the Hoof Uncovered, and we just recently had one with the Barefoot Horse magazine, but that's ended now. But we do know that there's still quite a lot of people that are quite interested in it. So if you stay to the end of the webinar, we'll give you a 20% off coupon, so you can go and purchase the Hoof Uncovered and watch it and have fun listening to us babble on about how amazing the horse's hoof was. So it's rather good. Are we ready then? Are you ready? Are you ready? Garry? Give us a thumbs up if you are ready for tonight's webinar. Do you want to watch all about forage, hay, haylage, or straw? So give us a thumbs up, folks, if you are ready. Margaret says yes. Tanya's got a thumbs up, and this is what we're going to cover. Should you feed hay, haylage, or straw to your horse, pony, or donkey? How many people watching now feel that they have got this well sussed out? They know exactly the forage they should be feeding their horse, and how much of it, and what, when. Do you know exactly what you're doing when you are feeding the cornerstone of the horse's diet? Do you know? Give us a well, there's loads of thumbs ups coming. Give us a thumbs down if you're not entirely sure. And Tonya says, just from your prior webinar, indeed.
Oh, thanks, Tonya.
That is lovely. Well, we're going to be delving into different parts of it, because if you've seen the diet one, we talked about certain things to do with hay and haylage, and we'll probably go over some of that again now, but we're then going to talk about other bits and pieces too. Yeah, it's not easy. All right, let's get on and let's see what we're going to be doing and what we're going to be talking about in this webinar. So there is a youngster with her pony going, don't know what's in this, but I think you'll love it. And that tends to be the theme very much of what happens when we feed these specialized animals, doesn't it, Garry? When we're on our workshops, people are confused. Let's just basically say they are confused.
I think that they're not as confused when they arrive, but then they go through a bit of a journey because they think they know what they're doing. But then when you scratch the surface, I have to say most people don't. And that's not to sound derogatory. I think that's just the way it is. And I think we can all say that we've all been there. Yeah,
we really have. I remember.
So it's not that anybody's silly or stupid or anything like that. It's just the way that it has been.
Lack of education.
Yeah, lack of education, lack of knowledge. So yeah, when you scratch the surface, these people, they're not lying, they're not fibbing, they think they have got it right, but when you scratch the surface, they actually don't know.
They don't know.
I think that's a bit of a wake-up call, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit of a wake-up call.
And for some, it's quite hard to come to terms with, but come to terms with they do, because they love their horses.
They do.
It's an amazing transformation.
I mean, I was a science teacher. I knew a lot about nutrition when it came to human nutrition and diet and stuff. And when I had Sonny with laminitis over 23 years ago, I didn't know what to feed. I didn't know whether I was feeding him straw, hay, haylage, how much of it, when I should feed it. He had laminitis. I didn't know what to do. And that was what started us on all of this journey, really. And the biggest thing that we want for you guys is for you to know and not be confused anymore. So let's do it then. So we're going to look tonight at the difference between hay, haylage, and straw. We're going to learn some of the common hay grasses that are okay to feed and those that aren't. We're going to find out how often you should be feeding forage and why. And I think that'll just be a theme that goes through basically. And you're going to know whether you should be weighing, soaking and testing your forage. Yes, let's get everybody completely neurotic and completely worried to death. And we're going to weigh, we're going to soak and we're going to test. And those are things that we aren't particularly keen on. And we'll tell you why as we go through them. Mainly because it becomes an obsession. Right. So what's the difference, Garry? Hay or haylage? Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. So hay and haylage. First off, I'm going to ask you a question whilst I'm going through. If I was to say that we had a field and it had the same seed mix in it, and one half was going to be cut, dried, and then baled as hay, and the other half of the field was going to be cut and dried exactly the same, and then wrapped as hay, haylage, or wrapped hay as we call it, which one would be higher in sugar? Now, if you've been on our courses already, you're not allowed to answer. If you've been on our courses already, you're not. Dear, see, Lucy Tribe is already there. She was going to get in there.
Neither's higher in sugar, says Margaret, question mark. Oh, Lucy says, oh.
Well, that's interesting. But one is higher.
Tegan says hay would be higher. Ooh.
Oh, I've taught Tegan well. Tegan is one of my clients in Wiltshire. Hi, Tegan.
Okay, so
well done, Tegan. Yes. Hay is actually higher in sugar. Some of the sugar in the wrapped hay is broken down by the fermentation process. Now, a lot of people find that really hard to believe because haylage or wrapped hay smells so sweet. But yes, it's a shocker, isn't it? There's less sugar in wrapped hay or haylage than there is in hay when you're doing a direct comparison.
And we'll talk about why that is as we go along. That is as we go along. Okay, so let's just do, I think we've talked about this before, but just as a recap, we're going to whiz through the differences between hay and haylage. So let's get going. Away you go, Garry.
Okay, so hay has a water content of below 20%, and haylage, typically water content is between 30 and 50%. I've had to move my chat box out of the way so I can read the screen. I should know it off by heart by now. Hay is dry enough to be protected from decay. Haylage is not dry enough, so it has to be wrapped. So to preserve it. So the next one. So hay doesn't have any fermentation that takes place because it's dry enough. Haylage, obviously, fermentation takes place over many weeks, and this is fermentation.
Yeah,
that fermentation has to finish. If you end up opening haylage before the fermentation process is finished, you'll get very poorly tummies.
And that fermentation process is exactly what we were just talking about now, just then, which was the sugar content. Yes. The reason that haylage actually does have a reduced sugar content compared to hay is because when hay is cut, what's in the hay is pretty much where it's going to stay at that level. But with haylage, because of the anaerobic fermentation that goes on with the bacteria, if that haylage is kept well sealed, then fermentation begins to take place and they use up those sugars to live. Basically, they use them up as a source of energy, and so those sugars go down. But then what happens is that as that happens, the pH begins to drop because the waste products that the bacteria produce are acidic, and so that pH begins to drop, and it's self-limiting. And this is what Gary's just been saying about, you don't feed it and for a period of time because that fermentation is active. but as the pH begins to drop, the bacteria then will be self-limited because they don't want to ferment, or they can't survive and ferment actively at lower pHs. So as it drops to a certain pH, the fermentation stops because the bacteria can't do it anymore. And then at that point, then it is safe to feed your equines. There you go. So
typically hay has a higher sugar content, and haylage is lower, just as we've explained, due to the fermentation process. Hay has to be stored under cover, and haylage can be stored outside. A lot of haylage is stored outside, but it can be a little bit problematic if you've got some annoying birds that like coming in and making holes in your haylage. That can be a major issue. I've had that before. Blimmin' crows.
I know, right? But then on the other hand, if you've not got the space to store hay, which an awful lot of people really haven't got the space to store enough hay.
It's another good alternative, isn't it?
Yeah, it's another good alternative.
Hay must be harvested in good sun, so they need good weather. Haylage can be harvested earlier, or even if the farmers, or should I say the weatherman, has got the forecast wrong and the hay might get a little bit damp and they have to get it in, it might actually be haylage that year.
Yeah, it might be. It might be.
Particularly in the inclement weather of the UK, where things don't always go according to plan. No,
indeed. And also with that whole bit about harvesting it earlier, haylage can be a very nutritious hay or nutritious forage, which, because it's got a good mix of seed, leaf and stem, because it's an earlier cut, but that doesn't always mean that it's going to be the best hay for horses, and particularly overweight horses. And as soon as we've got an awful lot of those, it can be problematic. However, it has other advantages too. So yeah, we'll carry on and then we'll see if we can fill in any others that we've missed.
Sure. So hay typically later harvest, which means that there's less nutrients. Haylage typically earlier harvest and higher nutrients. And finally, hay can be dusty, and haylage is dust free. So if we had a choice of a nice mixed meadow hay or haylage, hay would be our first port of call for sure. However, haylage or wrapped hay does have its place, particularly if you've got a horse with breathing problems. With the dust free and allergies, then wrapped hay or haylage can be a really good alternative. The downside for wrapped hay or haylage is because it is so palatable, horses generally get through quite a bit more of it. So they tend to put on a bit more weight. Another slight disadvantage with the haylage or the wrapped hay is because of the pH, which Lindsay touched on earlier. When the pH is more acidic, if you've got a horse that's prone to ulcers, that could potentially rear a problem in the gut and with the stomach.
It can aggravate the issue, can't it?
It can aggravate it, yeah. So they're very much there is a place for both, but if there was one that would be better than the other, then we would always go for a good quality mixed meadow hay.
And also with that, there's, you know, people get, because of this whole sugar content thing and the confusion with it, a lot of people think that they should be feeding last year's hay. You know, we get that a lot, don't we? Oh, I've been told my farmer says he's got a lot of last year's hay. Don't get fooled, folks. Don't get sucked down that route because he's got a bunch left in his shed that he'd like to, or in his barn that he'd like to get rid of, onto you, unsuspecting owner. Because what is likely to happen there is that because it's older, it's going to be dustier, and it's possibly going to have mold spores in it too. So old hay isn't an answer. You want good hay, you want good quality hay, good fresh hay, but hay that isn't dusty. And it's not easy. You know, if you have rainy moments, like Garry said, and you cut the hay and you don't get it in on time as well, you can't once you've baled it, you can't get it in and you can't store it. Hay is tricky. Hay is tricky to keep good and to keep the quality good and to keep it dust free. It is tricky. And we know that because we've been feeding hay for decades, and we've fed hay and haylage. So it can be tricky. Tonya says, found out recently that statistically a high percentage of horses suffer from ulcers. Have you heard that? Absolutely, Tonya. It is a real nightmare that's behind closed doors. Nobody can see it really, and an awful lot of behavioral issues with tacking up, with riding, with pain, with napping. A lot of issues are down to the fact that the horse feels very uncomfortable in their gut. And a big problem is the fact that people are not feeding forage. They're just not feeding enough because horses are stuck out on a grass paddock, the owner thinking, well, that's okay, they're eating grass, but they're not eating enough fiber. And that's the fiber that the horse needs. And of course, the fiber is going to help the ulcers because it's going to help create more saliva, which is going to help douse, if you like, the stomach and keep it so that it's less likely to be susceptible to ulcers, because that proton pump is pumping all the time, and it's in the stomach, which is causing the reason that it erodes the lining of the stomach and creates ulcers, is all because horses aren't fed enough fiber. And it's a big problem, isn't it, Garry?
It is, and like Tonya said, it's a big issue. There was some study done some years ago where they reckoned that 85 to 90% of domestic horses could be suffering with undiagnosed ulcers, which is horrendous.
Horrendous and crazy. It's awful.
But one of the best ways, and just to add to what Lindsay was saying, one of the best ways to actually put that to bed is to give them free access to good quality fibrous forage.
Yeah.
How many horses do we see? Well, we've just come back from Cornwall, and I think we lost count at how many horses were stuck out in grain fields with no hay to eat.
Yeah,
it's absolutely criminal, and we want to stop this. Hay is your best friend. It really is.
Yeah,
it should be your biggest concern. It's your biggest concern and your biggest outlay.
Yeah,
sure.
and Rach S says, when you ask people what they feed their horse, they never ever talk about the forage. It's always the hard feed and supplements. It is. They don't see the grass as a feed. You don't see that, or even the hay as a feed. And how many horses do we see out on these overgrazed paddocks, which are spiking in high sugars, which spike their insulin levels all the time, but they're hungry because they're not getting enough fiber going in through their gut. They're getting food that's easily digested in the foregut, which overloads the hindgut, and then the hindgut microbes aren't getting enough fiber to create the energy that the horse needs. And that is the process. And it's a simple process, really, but so many people just miss this, or are in a situation where they're in a livery yard or a barn where they're not allowed to feed hay in the field. That's another concern. It's a big problem. These people that are controlling whether the horses should have forage or not, and it's like it's a given. Okay, it's a given, full stop. Horses need it 24/7, 365. Grass or not, they need fibre, not just grass in the day, hay at night in the stable, or the other way around. They need it 24/7. It's a really big problem. Tony says hay should always be fed first. Most people do not realize this. I do realize I only need variety grass hay. Yeah. Lucy says, I think some people are looking for a later cut of last year's hay. I've had to do that until a later cut of this year's is available. The first cut of wrapped hay had delivered as too green, and a few handfuls a day was bringing the laminitic pulses up. They have no grass. Well, now, if you're getting first, second, and third cut from a farmer, and they're all slightly different. I won't go through it now. I think I've talked about it so many times, but don't ask me to do it now. I can if you want me to, but they're different. But if you're getting first, second, and third cut, you know that your farmer is fertilizing, because it's not really easy or possible with the type of weather we get nowadays to get that many cuts unless you're helping the grass along, unless the human being is providing that grass with more nutrients in order for that grass to grow. So you know that it's being fertilized. And of course, when you start fertilizing, that's when you start getting issues as well, because that doesn't help either. I can see Shelley Patterson has got her hand up. Shelley, is that because you want to say something, or is that because you're just saying hi? I don't know. I think, is that Shelley Patterson from Wales? I think it is.
It is, yes.
Poppy
I can't
says,
see that.
Poppy says, you just have to click on participants, Gary. You see where it says participants in your bar next to chat? Click on participants. You see that? Poppy says, how soon? She's saying hi. Poppy says, how soon after the hay is cut can you feed it? Some people say leave it for 8 weeks to cure. Some people say you can feed it straight away if bale very dry. But how do you tell if you don't know a way of testing moisture content? Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that, Gary?
Pretty much, it's not going to change from when it's baled. It's not going to change that much, if anything. Once it's been dried in those windrows and they've been baled, it's pretty much as it is. The only time that it's the longer it's being stored, the more it's having more time to actually break down into being a bit more dusty. That's all.
Yeah. I think that this is the big confusion, because people often say,
it's the big confusion.
Leave it. It's the haylage you have to leave. The haylage you have to leave.
It's the haylage. So that's very important with the haylage. But
with the hay, there's not going to be a huge reduction from the tests that have been done. There's not going to be a massive reduction. So because it's not got the moisture content, because the only way that sugar can reduce is if bacteria are actively fermenting it, which they're not going to do unless it's been wrapped. Okay, let's move on then. So what to look out for in our forage? You can take this away again, Gary, if you like.
Okay. So horses need a mixed species of grasses, and some of those are, we've got fescues, and we have orchard grass or cocksfoot, and everybody knows Timothy. And to be quite honest, it's really you want a mixed species as possible. There are many fescues and different types of Timothy and loads. You want whatever your soil can provide. You want as mixed species as you can possibly get. If you're making your own, if you're not, you want the farmer to be doing pretty much similar. There is one grass, I have to say, that you need to avoid, and that is rye. So would everybody know what rye looks like? I know it's up on the screen already, but did everybody know what rye looks like and how they can identify it? The fescues, the orchard grass, and the Timothy's, you can get all of those seed heads and do your research. All of those are brilliant and provide a nice diverse area. But the rye is, you can see that the seeds come off at angles off of the stem, but when you turn it on its side, it's absolutely flat. So it's like it's been stuck in a book.
Yeah,
and
it's a really good
flat.
way of
So,
explaining it. Different to
yeah,
couch grass, which looks similar.
Yes,
couch grass.
It does. But the seeds come off at a different angle.
And they're facing the stem, couch grass, which then means it's not flat.
Yes. So couch grass looks similar, but it's not the same. And couch grass is absolutely fine. But rye has, well, there has been recent studies that ryegrass, even in its dry format, has 300 times more sugar than the mixed species meadow grasses.
That's right. That's
so
right.
It is great for fattening our meat, and it is great for producing milk and all of that for the food industry, but not for our horses. Unfortunately, they don't live very long. Meat animals don't live very long. I have to say dairy cows don't live very long these days either. So yes, with rye, it needs to be avoided because we want our horses to live long and happy lives. There's too much sugar, it's far too rich. Now also, if you've got rye in your hay, that would indicate that there's not actually that much species, you're not very species diverse in that field where that hay was cut from, because rye is quite invasive. And particularly works very well with nitrogen fertilizer. So again, fertilized grass is not ideal, but if it was fertilized but it hasn't got rye in it, it's sort of a halfway house. Rye will eventually die out, but nitrogen can stay in the soil for up to 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's quite difficult to get rid of once you've got it.
Yeah.
Shall I do my history lesson of why we had rye?
You can.
Okay. So rye came to the UK in particular during the war. Well, it was after the war, because we needed to feed the millions. We were already on rations, and that was without all the soldiers coming home. And then obviously all the soldiers came home and everybody started to procreate, and we needed to feed the millions really, really quickly. So this crop of rye came in. You can get 3 or 4 cuts out of it a year. It allows the cattle to fatten up in much quicker time, so they can be slaughtered, and it produces almost twice as much milk.
It does.
And because it's really, really good with nitrogen, we had a surplus of nitrogen after the war, because that's what we made our bombs out of.
Hey,
so
boom.
The government were looking in and saying, boom, boom, we've got a solution here.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we haven't gone backwards. We haven't gone back to the way it was before. We've just stuck with it. That's why rye is a big problem for horses. I have to say it's quite a big problem for cattle and sheep and all of that as well.
Yeah.
But we're not here talking about that today. We're talking about our horses.
No, and it's very hard wearing. That's why they use it for lawns. It's why it's very popular for golf courses and playing fields, parks, children's areas. The rye is really popular. Pathways. Because it is more hard wearing, but it does need a little bit more help from the human being, because if it's left to its own devices and it's not fertilized, then gradually over time it will get outcompeted by the native grasses. And we've only just put a few up here. There are so many different native species, and you've got the cool grasses that like to grow in the sort of spring and autumn, and then you've got the warmer grasses that like to grow in the summertime. But as long as you're staying away from ryegrass, even though so many people, and we still hear it say ryegrass is okay. We would counter that, because as hoof care professionals, you've got to remember, we are out there all the time looking at hooves and helping horses with laminitis. It's like our primary thing that we have to deal with all the time. And footsore horses and horses with all these different pathologies in their hooves and, of course, in their bodies. And because it's our primary concern, this has become our primary thing. And we know, because we deal with so many of these animals, that if you take the rye away and you completely, and you get it out of your hay or your haylage, then things do improve. And of course, also you've got the grass side of it too. But if you have horses who aren't eating grass and they're just on hay, so on a track system, perhaps when they're just on hay, don't be fooled to think, oh, well, they're not on grass, so it's okay if there's a little bit of rye in my hay. That little bit of rye can still add to your horse experiencing foot issues, can't it, Garry? It's not okay, yes, it's all right now because there's no grass. We have a problem in the equine world, and this is one of the biggest, I'm afraid. 80 says, if hay contains weeds that are slightly poisonous fresh, like buttercup, she's talking about ranunculus, if that's the right name in English, then the hay should be left for some weeks. Well, yeah, we don't want a lot of weeds in the hay, or what we might concern are problematic, because horses can't discern. In fact, most animals can't discern something when it's as easily tell the difference when something is dead compared to when it's alive. And one of those problems is with ragwort. If ragwort is in the field and it's cut, that's not a good thing if it's in the hay. So, but usually farmers are pretty good with that. And we've never found a particular major issue with too much buttercup, to be honest, not in the hay, but certainly things like ragwort need to be looked out for. Juliet says, so when hay is scarce as it is at the moment, is that Juliet in Cornwall? When hay is scarce as it is at the moment, which is the better option for fatties, haylage or hay with rye in it? Such a good question. Ooh, it's such a good question. The answer is neither, right? I guess, but what do you do? I think if it was me, and I had the option of haylage with no rye or hay with rye, I'd go with the haylage and make sure my horses moved more. That would be the answer. I'd go with the haylage that had no rye in it, because I know that would be safe, but knowing that my horse is going to eat quite a lot of it, I would ensure that the horses had to move more. So in other words, you're dotting it around your track system and you're making them, really encouraging them to move. So that's how I would do it. Certainly not restricting it, but I think that's what I would go for. Rach says, I feed 50-50 Timothy hay and 10% haylage meadow, less than 10%. Timothy is less than 10%. And is that, what is it? Is that haylage meadow is less than 10%? Am I reading that right? What?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be haylage meadow, which is also less than 10%.
Okay.
I think that's what that's reading.
Yeah, less than 10% sugar and starch. Sorry. Okay, yeah. And you only know that because you've tested it, right? But let me tell you that if you are feeding a mixed species hay, that whole testing thing can start to go out of the window. But hey, let's move on, because we can talk about more about that later on. Otherwise, we will just do what we usually do and go on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So what about alfalfa? We get asked a lot about alfalfa and whether we should feed alfalfa. So there are some things you sort of need to know about alfalfa and horses, because alfalfa, particularly in the States, it's fed a lot. It's fed a lot in France. It isn't as alfalfa hay isn't fed as much in the UK as it is over here and as it is in the States and in other places in the world. But it's still a problem because it can still be fed in other, using sort of pellets or it's not just bales, it can be cubed, can't it, where you have to soak it. And it is a forage, but it's a legume. So that means that it's a nitrogen fixer. It fixes nitrogen from the air. It can do that in its roots, and it's widely cultivated all over the world because a bit like rye, it can produce a very high yield, and it's a very high value hay crop. Because it is also a bit like rye, it is a fattening crop. And horses that are put on high protein diets can, again, this is down to the stomach and ulcers again, which it can mean that things can be overly acidic. It can cause inflammation in all different parts of the body systems, including the joints and the hooves. And it can also make horses get a little bit hot, a little bit anxious, a little bit agitated, and any pathologies that they've got, it can increase those. So let's just go through that again. So it's dense in protein, vitamins and nutrients, which kind of makes you think, oh yeah, it's going to be great. But the problem with that is that it can cause really fast weight gain, and you don't want that if you're feeding a high proportion of alfalfa. And with young stock, it can lead to growth problems, especially if they have any growth issues as well. That can lead to growth problems because they're just growing too quick, because they're just getting too much. It's already adding to an obesity epidemic that we already have, and too much alfalfa can exacerbate existing pathologies. So you have to be careful with alfalfa. You really do. Or lucerne, lucy nuts, that's another term for it. If you're going to feed anything like we don't suggest you feed anything other than a mixed species meadow hay, because we see hyper-supplementation and hypernutrition all the time. I mean, all the time. And then when we take horses off that and they feed a mixed meadow hay and they've got freedom to move and friends and forage, things just settle down, inflammation settles down, and it all starts to go away. When you start adding extra things into the diet and things like alfalfa, soaking alfalfa, lucy nuts, that sort of thing, then you're going to start asking for problems when you have horses that are very susceptible. And let's face it, frankly, every single horse is susceptible to too much protein, vitamin and nutrients. It's not just that too. It's how all these vitamins and nutrients and these minerals act with each other too, and what other things can happen when you have too much protein in the diet. Lucy says, thank you for enlightening me about the danger of alfalfa in EMS horses. Even a small amount can cause an issue, pulses up. Absolutely. One of my TBs is allergic to alfalfa. It's not great. And, you know, they've done studies on sheep too with alfalfa. And they found, because alfalfa is quite high in phytohormones, and they found this, like plant hormones, and they're certain sorts of plant hormones, and they found that it can cause problems with reproduction in sheep, right? So it's an issue. We know it's an issue. They don't exactly know why it can be problematic to horses, other than the fact that it is quite dense in its nutritional value. But you just got to be very careful. And because you've got to be careful, just forget it, is what we would say. Wouldn't we, Garry? We would definitely say forget it.
Yes, avoid it. It's not necessary. Like we said at the beginning, all of your energy needs to be just focusing on the best hay that you can get without rye in it.
Yeah, Rachel says most chaff feeds contain alfalfa. Actually everywhere when you start reading labels. It is. It's everywhere. Lucerne, when you know that it's called lucerne. Not just that too, they use rye for chaff. They use things that they can grow a lot of, right? Because they're producing lots and lots of bagged chaff. So they're not going to produce loads of bagged meadow hay, because they can't get a lot of it. So it tends to be the stuff that they can grow a lot of, and that is usually the stuff that doesn't sit well with our horses. So we've talked about hay, we've talked about haylage and species, mixed species as possible. And if you can only get Timothy, if you can only get Bermuda, if you can only get Teff, then of course you're going to be struggling in one way or another. So it's up to you as a horse owner to go out and see what else you can source and mix them together. If farmers in your area of the world are not, growing everything that's mixed, then it's up to you to try and get different hays and mix them together. And I know it's really difficult in certain places in the world, like certain islands like Greece and hot places where, you know, they have to ship it in because they can't grow anything there. That's problematic, it really is. But it's fine. It's really digging down and getting to the source of it, because it's a false economy to go, oh, well, we'll just have that hay because that's the hay we can get. You know, our horses need hay, we get it in, but it makes them unwell and poorly. And then you've got to spend money getting them better because now they're sick. So it's a false economy doing that. You've really got to get to the source and find out what's going on in there. It's not difficult to be able to identify certain species too. Shelley says, what food do you recommend for an old TB that is losing weight mostly in the winter time? He's only on hay 24/7 on a track. Well, there's a whole story about older horses, isn't there? And whether we should be trying to feed them up to make them look like they used to look like, because we can see them losing weight and we're worried about them. But in my experience, and in the experience that Gary's had, and in the experience that we've had with many, many hundreds of elderly horses, is that we've just got to allow them to be the weight that they need to be. And that sometimes is a bit skinny and a bit ribby. They're not sick, they're not unwell, they just are thinner than they used to be. They don't carry that top line, they don't carry that famous top line that everybody talks about. They don't have as much muscle on their body as they used to have. And so should we be feeding them up to make them look better, and sticking them out in the grass in the summertime to fatten them up, knowing full well that what we're going to have again are problems with hooves and problems with their guts? A steady hay diet 24/7 365 is really what they need. And as long as they've got good teeth, as long as you're checking that, making sure that their teeth are done regularly and they're happy in a herd, then really, if they've lost a little bit of weight, they should just level themselves out. And gradually over time, that weight will just get less and less until one day they do pop off the ends of the earth. That is how it happens with these elderly horses. And I think trying to get them heavier isn't really the answer. So I know what you're going through, Shelley, but I think if he's happy on hay, then you just keep it going. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. And I'm sure Shelley would too, because I know Stanley, who she's talking about. He has, the last time I saw him, he had really good teeth, so he was having a good amount of fiber throughput for sure. But I think it's almost that we need to allow our horse the dignity of getting old. If I don't like to anthropomorphize too much, putting human things, but I know if my granny was really, really skinny and could only eat a few small meals a day because otherwise she would have the world falling out of her bottom or anything like that, we wouldn't be forcing high calorie, high sugar, high protein stuff into her either. I think we've got to embrace that some of these horses, and sometimes they've had a really hard life before they've come to us. So history has a big part to play. I think we need to do what's best for sure, but having a horse that that is 25 to 30, but we want them to look like a 10-year-old, I think is actually unrealistic. And I think we've lost sight of that.
Yeah, it is. And Rach S says, this topic hits me in the feels a bit, as I feel responsible for one of my older horses who I tried to feed up when he was getting skinny. I wish I knew then what I know now. Yeah, we do. We try and feed them up because we don't like it. We've all been there. I've been there. Gary's been there. Yeah. You just have to just know that if they're happy, they're healthy, they're fine. Just because they're a bit skinny, that's the way it is. They are old. They're getting older. And that's what happens to us as human beings too. All right, so let's quickly move on. We haven't touched on straw. So what about straw? Well, everybody thinks, oh, straw, high fiber, and that we're told that it's like going from one extreme to the next. It's like going, oh, no fiber in the grass, pretty much. And now we're going to go to, can't do the mixed hay. So I know we'll feed straw. And we know that there are quite a few charities out there that deal with donkeys that tell owners to feed straw. Because donkeys suffer from laminitis. They're an odd-toed ungulate. They're from the family Equidae. They are from the genus Equus. They're just a different species. Pretty much everything else around about them is very similar. And if you go and feed them just straw, then you're going to be asking for problems. And we're going to go through that in a moment. But one of the biggest issues that we have with straw is not just how it's treated. We're going to talk about that, but also the fact that it is so high in fiber. And you've got to think about these animals out in their native environment. The donkey came from the wild ass. It came from Africa, Equus africanus, they think, which ate a wide variety of fiber. It didn't just eat one species. You feed straw, you're really only going to be feeding one cereal type of straw, and it just isn't. It's just not great for them. So let's just go through the reasons that straw are not particularly brilliant. Well, first of all, what kind of straws are we likely to get? So we've got wheat straw, barley straw, and oat straw. Those are the main ones. Those are the most important straws that you get. And horses that are starving, if they've that have laminitis, when people think that the thing that they should be doing is locking them in a box to get over their laminitis, and that's not now how we know horses recover from laminitis, horses, ponies and donkeys. It's not how they recover from laminitis. But those that are starved and put in a box, you'll see them eating their bedding. If the horse is on straw, or the equine is on straw, you'll find that they eat their bedding. People are, oh, they're eating my bedding. They're starving and they need fiber, and so they will resort to eating their bedding because it's made of straw. So what about straw? So I have to move my cat. Here he is. Look, he's going to come say hello. Oh, hi. He's got to
Hiya, Flops.
because he's being a pain. So what about straw? Well, it's a very coarse forage with a very high fiber content. Well, hey, you think, brilliant, it's got high fiber. And we know that horses need fiber for the hindgut, for their bacteria to break this fiber down. But the problem with that is that it has a high level of what they call lignin, which is indigestible fiber. And I'm going to go on to the caustic soda bit in a minute, but lignin is part of the cell wall. If you know, and if you remember your biology, plants have very uniform, regularly shaped cells compared to us, which have cell membranes, and they kind of have a sort of blobby shapes to them. With cells, in plants, they need cells that have a more rigid structure. So in order for them to grow, to stand upright and the wind blows, they don't fall over and all of that kind of thing. So lignin is one of a few different types of fiber that we call fiber that makes up the cell wall. But in the hindgut, it's not that digestible by the microbes. In fact, very indigestible. So one of the things that they found is that if they treated it with caustic soda, it would break down some of that lignin, which would then make it more digestible for the equine to eat. But feeding something that's been treated with caustic soda, we don't think is a great idea, do we, Gary? No. It's not a great idea. Caustic soda, for those of you who don't know, is sodium hydroxide, and it's there. It breaks down that structural fiber, that lignin, and so that increases the digestibility. But hey, just go back to your hay. and the whole thing about the donkey thing is they weren't meant to be fed a single species straw or a single species hay. But it's all because donkeys are overfed, just like horses are overfed, just like ponies are overfed. They too suffer from laminitis. They too suffer from an obesity epidemic. They have the terrible feet and terrible lammy crests and fat pads and all of that too. They really do suffer, donkeys. And one of the things is people go, oh, straw, because it's high in fiber, but it's not very, species specific, but it's going to help my horse lose weight or my equine lose weight. It's not a great way of doing it because it has this, it's low, it's a single species, it is low in nutritional value because it's so high in this lignin. It doesn't mean that, it means that that animal is not getting the nutrients that it should. So what should you do? Top it up with supplements? I mean, you're just shutting the stable door while it's bolted, because now you're trying to top up the problem that you've just caused by feeding the straw in the first place. They say it's good for easy keepers or horses, ponies or donkeys that should lose weight, but is this the way they should be losing weight? By restricting what that animal should be getting in terms of the nutrients? It's not a great thing to do. They will lose weight on it, but it really isn't the greatest thing to do. And just similarly, like we were talking earlier, there is evidence now that it could increase gastric ulcers if it is the only forage. So be warned, don't feed straw. Go out and go searching for that mixed meadow hay. Know what to look for, because straw, a cereal straw or a cereal hay as they're sometimes known, isn't the best thing that you can do. Oop. Rachel Briffer says, so if donkey's being fed on straw 95% of the time, this will still cause the feet to be separated or not grow healthy? Yeah. So Rach is a professional. She's out there too. I've seen it too. It doesn't solve the problem, because an awful lot of people think, oh, it's okay, I can feed straw, they can go out on grass again. Don't do that. That's you're doing this to the gut all the time, and you're starving the bacteria in the hind gut of this essential fiber that they need. So it's not feeding the gut bacteria, it's not helping the gut bacteria. Heidi Horwell says, is there a nutritional difference in the straw? I always thought oat hay is better. Yeah, there is a difference. Barley, I believe, is one of the better nutritional value straws. Oat and barley compared to wheat. I think wheat is one of the lower ones. But again, compared to mixed species hay, they're low in nutritional value. So they do have differences between them, but compared to mixed species, they're low, simply because of this very high fiber and the fact that it is a single species. So good question. All right, are we okay? Give us a thumbs up if you're all still hanging on in there and happy. Give us a thumbs up. Are you learning stuff? Is this good? Are you happy? Good. This is good. Lovely. Lots of big thumbs up. That's marvelous. Wonderful job. All right, so let's get on to some obsessions, shall we? It's a little bit of neurosis that we feed into. Marette says very happy. We feed into the marketing world, feeds into the neurosis that is the horse owner. And I hate to say it, but it's usually the female horse owner too. And I know, right, I can say that because I'm a female. Wouldn't look right if it was coming from Garry, but I can say it because I'm female. It is a problem. We are being told all sorts of things that are very conflicting. And then when we talk about hay, then the vets get involved if we've got laminitic ponies or problems, horses with problems, and then we get the should we weigh, should we soak, or should we test? Oh, the neurosis. Oh, the problems. Right, loads of things just popped up. Bev Moran says, I occasionally hang on a few random nets of barley straw around, not as a substitute for hay. They get plenty of that. Surely that's safe for them. My question would be, why? Because you are filling up their gut with something that it has got a lower nutritional value, and they can't break it down. So if you're doing that to reduce weight, again, that's not the best way to do it, to affect the gut. The best way to do it with every single organism on the planet that's like us, you know, mammals that are overweight, our pets that are overweight, exercise. Don't feed with horses. Because of the way that they are built, monogastric herbivores, you can't feed them less and think, oh, you know, that they're not predators. So they're not like dogs that have a meal a day and can then spend the rest of the time digesting that. Horses need it to be going through their gut constantly. It's not a high nutritional value. It is hay is a lower nutritional value than, if you like, sugar, grasses that have lots of sugar in them that are going to spike in the foregut and are going to be absorbed across the gut wall in the foregut. But it is still going to be an improvement on that and an improvement on straw. So I personally wouldn't feed straw because I wouldn't want it replacing anything that I'm feeding in terms of hay. Mark Doty says, what grasses are in four-way hay? Four-way hay? I don't know four-way hay. To you, Gary?
It's not a term that I've come across. So yeah, not sure. I'd have to do some research on that.
Is that a wrapped commercial hay? Mark, let us know, and where you're located. Give us a little bit more info on that. Heidi says, what is oatgrass? My vet recognized? Well, oatgrass, you can have wild oat grass, or you can have cereal oat, which is what you get oat straw from. So but if it's wild oat, you don't have to worry about that. Rach S says, I hold my hands up, I'm both obsessed and confused. Gosh, everybody always is. Lucy says, and the how many hours to soak opinions to confuse everyone. Right, weighing and soaking. Should we just enter into the neurosis that is whey soaking thing? It's a very highly popular, it's become incredibly popular in recent years, particularly soaking hay. That's become very popular. But it's worth noting here that if you are feeding mixed meadow hays, especially non-fertilized hays that are high in biodiversity without any rye, and you know if there's no rye in it, likelihood is it's going to be higher in biodiversity, then the need for these types of practices would basically be null and void. The fact that they've indeed grown in popularity goes to show really that forages that are being fed to horses are simply just too high in nutrients and sugars for them. So if you're out there being told to soak, you know that there's probably something else going on, or you're soaking and you don't need to, and you're wasting your time. And owners tend to default to things like restricting their hay, e.g. weighing, or soaking their hay, rather than removing the one thing that really is causing them harm, which is the green grass. How many people weigh their grass? How many people soak their grass? Okay, the rain does that for us a little bit. How many people test their grass? And yet the cornerstone of the horse's diet, the hay or steaming, Bev says steaming, same thing. So we're going, well, not to say same thing, but a similar situation. The reason for steaming is the same reason for soaking. Some people steam and soak because they have horses that have got respiratory issues, but the main reason people are soaking and steaming is because they're trying to reduce the sugars. You ask anybody, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to remove the sugars out of the diet. So if you remove your grass, that's the main problem. You get that out of the diet, then most of these issues will just simply go away and dissipate. You won't have to start soaking and you won't have to start weighing, especially if you've got the right hay. So don't go for restricting and soaking the hay first, go for restricting the green stuff first. Wouldn't you agree, Gary?
Yes, for sure. I just found out a little bit about four-way hay, just to go back a wee bit.
Yeah.
And basically the bit that I found, it's basically wheat, barley, oat and rye. Okay.
So the answer to
or
that,
mixtures
then, Mark,
of. So pretty much is I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole.
No, I would
touch it with
definitely
a
not.
barge pole.
No, I'm just going to wipe up my computer that I've just spilled coffee over. Oh no. So I think that, you know, a lot of vets will talk to owners. They don't spend enough time talking to the owners about their diet and the management and the problems that you have. And they may not even be that aware, really, of how important that is. They kind of know, but they don't know as much as we do because we're in it and out all the time, spending valuable time with our owners talking about this. So I think that you know, I'm not going to be down on a downer here, but I think that the veterinary profession has caused quite a big issue with all of this, when they could have been solving the issue for years, instead of going and shutting the stable door once the horse is bolted and let's now start soaking and weighing the hay. They could have been there talking about the management with these owners, talking to them about the problems that they're having with their grass. Perhaps they just don't really appreciate these problems themselves, which is what I believe. I think they just don't really appreciate the problems. And so they're always default to restricting, you know, weighing, reducing, starving, or soaking the hays first. And that is a problem, because that vital fibre, which is the horse's cornerstone, should have it 24/7, 365, always available to them, is what they should be keeping, and they should be restricting the one thing that's causing the problem, which is the grass. We'll come back to your question, or what you said in a moment, Rach. I can see that it's coming up. So weighing hay. Why do we weigh hay? We're weighing hay to restrict the sugar intake, because also this horse might be EMS, it's overweight, so we're going to start reducing how much food we give it. Again, they are not predators. They don't go and eat, or they're not cows either, so they're not you know, they haven't got 4 stomachs. They don't eat a load of food and then just sit around digesting it, regurgitating it, re-chewing it, sending it back again. They don't do that. Horses can't do that. Horses need a throughput constantly. The only time that they don't have it going through their stomachs or their stomach is when they are sleeping, moving, playing. For the rest of the time, then they're eating. It's really important that they do. So when you're weighing, you're reducing how much forage that horse is going to have, and it's not a great thing to do. So when a horse owner is given that dreaded diagnosis of EMS or laminitis, the first thing that usually happens is the weighing or soaking. And this is all in this attempt to reduce this calorific intake, basically lowering those sugar levels, lowering those insulin levels, and stopping that inflammation. But they're doing it the wrong way around. It does go hand in hand with a laminitis diagnosis, and it particularly often goes hand in hand with the restriction of movement, because now you've put your horse in a stable, or you've put it in a dry lot, or you've removed it away from all of its friends and family, and so now it's not moving as much. And you're reducing the hay, and you're just doing all the things topsy-turvy and back to front, because now you're going to affect the way that the metabolism works, and it is the metabolism that keeps your horse healthy, a good metabolism, and it's not moving, so you're affecting the way that it's losing weight. So this is the big problem, and often these are horses, ponies, donkeys, that we're dealing with, and we're feeding them, and we're trying to look after them in a way that we would look after cattle. And like Garry said earlier, we don't want to eat them. Well, we don't. I know that some countries do, in the country I'm sat in at the moment occasionally, but we don't want to particularly. These are our animals that we are leisure animals. We want to ride them, or we want to play with them on the ground. We want to keep them healthy. We don't want to eat them or milk them. So we shouldn't be thinking about taking our cues on how to look after them from the cattle industry, and specifically the dairy industry. So, you know, looking at body weight and feed intake and all of that sort of thing, but forgetting that they are then feeding also. A lot of owners that start weighing hay also feed treats and indiscriminately feed the grass. So they're quite happy to go and weigh the hay, the cornerstone of the horse's diet, but then they'll just indiscriminately send the horse out to eat a bunch of grass as well, which also contains sugar. So it's a bit kind of topsy-turvy. So believe horses should be given a set ration depending on their weight. This is what all the weighing of the weighing hay is about. But again, it isn't the hay that you should ever be restricting. And if it is the right hay, you know, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you've heard us say it. There's just mixed species hay. Owners often will weigh the hay because they use it to cut down waste. You know, that's another reason that they're doing it. 1.5 to 2.5% of their body weight in forage each day. Oh, well, good luck with that one then, because, you know, most people don't really know the proper weight of their animals anyway. And when you do a weight tape and then you take your animal and put them on a if you're able to put them on a weigh scale, then you'll find that there's often quite a big disparity between that two, and what people see and what they think is right. And when people think that horses are, I mean, the whole weight thing with horses, it's a complete nightmare, really. Jump in at any time, Garry, if you feel that you need to jump in.
Yeah.
The exact amounts really just depend on the lifestyle, the management, the turnout. You know, every horse is different in every situation with every single owner. We go to see hundreds of owners, and each horse is slightly different in every situation. You take one horse and you put it in a different situation, it will react differently. So you really do have to be thinking about the way that you're managing your turnout. It's basically a nightmare. You're going down the nightmare
route. There's one thing I'd like to add. We've been feeding simply just hay, mixed species hay, to our horses for a very long time. Now, if we're giving a certain weight of forage each day, in the winter, our horses get through way more hay. Way more hay. Huge amounts of hay, because they end up having to keep themselves warm. So they need more. When they're molting, or when they're growing new hair, or they eat more. They need more for those bodily functions. In the summer, they tend to eat a lot less. So there are so many things that are going on with this specialist animal. They need to know, and they need to have access so they can eat basically as much as they need to function. And that's a real eye-opener for me when I was not doing things as naturally in the beginning, and how things have progressed. It is amazing to see the difference between how much horses need going through different parts of their life, and whether there's environmental stresses. They might be moving more. In France, we have the hunt, and they come round and then they cause the horses to get into a little bit of a tiz. So they're going to eat more that day. If we end up restricting it to 1.5% of their body weight, then no matter what, they're not going to be getting enough.
Well, they can't regulate, can they? They can't self-regulate. Again, humans are trying to take over the regulation of their horse's body by just what they look like and what they think. And exactly. It's not a good thing to do. It's not a good thing to go down. So it does become a real problem. And if you're keeping horses like we do together in a herd, how do you do that then? How do you weigh hay for a certain animal? This is when you're keeping, again, animals unnaturally, where they're maybe on their own, or the vets freaked you out because your horse is overweight and you've got laminitis. You're like, oh my God, I've got to weigh. It's not the answer. I know it sounds crazy when we say it's not the answer. Feed hay constantly, permanently, because you're like, but think of all the other stuff you can take out of the diet first before you start taking out this, right? It's a true nightmare. It's a rabbit hole to go down, because things can and we can say this from masses of experience, because we've seen it over and over and over again. And it really does affect you as a human being as well, because it adds to all the other pressures of looking after your animal or your horse. And like Garry says, things can change for a horse on a daily basis, depending on all sorts of factors, weather, rugging, clipping, movement, and energy requirements. So it's not just all about the weight, and they need to be able to regulate as much as they can themselves. And it doesn't stop there, does it? Because we don't just weigh hay. We've now gone down this whole obsession with small whole hay nets to restrict the horse eating. Again, let's restrict all these things to lose weight. I've heard it all. We're going to weigh the hay. We're going to soak the hay. I'm going to use small hay nets, small whole hay nets. I'm going to clip the horse in the winter so it forces him to shiver or makes him move more. So all of these things are all unsubstantiated pretty much. And there's more. And that's not the way for an animal to lose weight. So that's, none of those things are the way for an animal to lose weight. It causes stressing, and it causes issues that we now know, things like ulcers, that are a problem. Our horses eat, if you want to use hay nets, don't use small hole hay nets if you can avoid it. It's not a decent way for an animal to lose weight, because if you're feeding mixed species hay that isn't high in sugars, because it's mixed species, not got rye in it, and it's not got other cereal stuff, it's not got alfalfa in it, then you can feed it freely and let them walk lots and let them move lots and let them nose around in it and get the things that they like. If you feed out of a hay net, there's all other knock-on effects that are going to be a problem. Okay, if you want to feed out of a hay, some things out of a hay net, but if you do that continually, nothing but hay nets, it's not a good idea for various reasons, which all of them we can't go into now. The one thing that you should be restricting is the one thing that most people don't. They'll be going, oh, I'm going to weigh the hay, I'm going to do all of this. I'm still going to feed a load of supplements though, and some bagged feeds, and so no, that's your cornerstone. Don't fiddle about with that. Fiddle about with everything else first. Get rid of all that obsession first, which is the going down the pink aisle and buying all the other expensive things that you feed your horse. Because if you kept grass at bay and you get that movement increasing and you had the right hay, then the problems would just all fade away. You wouldn't need to be doing all of this. So it is one of those things. Shall I stop now and read some of these? Gary, have you been reading them?
Yes.
Bev says, I'm steaming for respiratory reasons. It's only slightly reduced the sugar, so still maintains nutrition. Yes. Vets don't get, I'll talk about that in a minute. Vets do not get much nutrition education unless they do extra. No, that's true. My vet told me to feed straw and soak. I'm going to put this over here so you don't see the side of my head. My vet told me to feed straw and soak all hay, straw. I sourced meadow haylage, hay, less than 10% sugar starch, then fade ad lib with nibble ease nets. My vet thinks I'm nuts, but he's sound and happy barefoot on a track. No evidence of inflammation. It's confusing when professionals tell you the opposite. And I'll bet if you stopped using the nibblies, it would be fine. I do not listen to vets on any nutrition advice unless it is an integrated vet. People, Low said, thank you, Tonya. Low says, people weigh hay because we are told horses should have 2% body weight. And for all of those reasons we've talked about before. Lucy says, I have to soak any meadow hay that is green for super sensitive EMS laminitis. Brown hay is fine. Seeing seed heads is a good indication that it's safe too. Don't weigh it there. Ad lib. Increase the movement, Lucy. That's what you need to be doing. If you feel, I mean, I'd be surprised if you're getting that much of a change in sugar content with that. I would be thinking of ways to increase the movement for sure. Rach S says restriction confuses me because it's well known that restriction equals starvation mode, which is why weight loss industry in humans is so huge. Yes, yes, and fasting and all of that. Garry has a whole talk on that, but we haven't got time for that. But it's a great talk on all about the starvation syndrome. My husband and I have had many arguments over the horses due to my horse's EMS. It really does affect life when you struggle. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I net to slow down my lot with less wastage on ad lib hay. Would you say netting with ad lib hay is okay, better to be loose? I prefer loose. It's better for the horse. It's less stressful for the horse. It's better for all various reasons. It's the same thought process. We're weighing, soaking, clipping, small hay nets, whole hay nets. It's all of this. It's the wrong thing to be thinking. Don't restrict the good stuff. Make your horse move more. See how you can encourage horses to move more. Enrich your environment so that they move more. Exercise them more, because we've got a problem with not horses getting enough exercise. Don't take away the grass, take away the supplements, take away the bag feeds, and then see. And when we say this to our owners and we go down that route, and then we go, now are you still having to feed small hold hay nets? And they go, oh, no, I don't. A lot of it is convenience. People like to stuff nets and then they like to wander around and hang them all up. But, you know, it ain't the most natural thing to do. What about soaking hay? Soak, soak, soak. Now, this is an interesting one, right? Again, we're doing it to reduce the sugar, specifically the water-soluble carbohydrates. That's what, or the water-soluble sugars. And Bev was saying that she steamed. So it's a similar process with steaming. And what Bev is doing it for is to reduce the dust for compromised equids with respiratory issues. And it is better to steam rather than soak in that instance. And yes, that is something that I can fully go down that route, but bearing in mind that there are optimum times, and you are going to at some point restrict certain nutrients. But if you've got a horse with very bad breathing problems, then it is something you can do, or you could go down the HAYLAGE route. But the problem that you have with soaking and just put that over there, with soaking and steaming, is you're not just leaching the sugars, you also leach out valuable nutrients, which are essential, things like essential minerals. So you're leaving horses at risk of nutrient deficiencies and potentially weight loss. And again, you are going, well, that's okay, because I could just stuff in a load of supplements, but you kind of just, it's a scattergun approach. That's what we tend to see with our owners. And these essential minerals that are important for the healthy functioning of the body, let's face it, they really are. And what people don't seem to understand is that the nutrient loss, in fact, can be more than the sugar loss, and that can really affect horses. The Kentucky Equine Research Unit found that in addition to trace minerals, crude protein and amino acid levels also diminish rapidly after just 15 minutes of soaking. And that research was done in 2021, folks. The researchers soaked hay for variable periods of time, ranging from 15 minutes to 12 hours. And I know people who soak all overnight, right? They'll soak everything overnight, thinking that, oh, that'll reduce as much as I can. And then they've got like a 20-minute period, draining period. And some people drain it and let the horses drink the water that they've drained it from. Now, I don't understand what's going on there. But there's some of the important observations that they found was that they, as expected, the soaking the hay decreased the WSCs, or the water-soluble carbohydrates, or water-soluble sugars. But the researchers found that more nutrients were lost in comparison, which could have potentially led to the weight loss, but not a great way of doing it. But one of the big things that they found was that the washout of the sugars happens in the first 15 minutes, folks. That's the crucial thing. So that longer soaking times, longer than 15 minutes, didn't result in loss of more sugar. It resulted in loss of more nutrients. So the washout happened for sugars in the first 15 minutes because they're water soluble. And that's what they found. How many people watching didn't know that? And this is stuff that we're finding out now, because this is the sort of research that we're doing. Yeah, Tonya says synthetic vitamins aren't good. And this is what we're filling our horses up with, these synthetic vitamins, and just too much of everything. Trimmer nutritionists I've used in the past all say to give a hoof supplement if you're feeding a diet which is mainly hay. What are your thoughts? I do feed a hoof supplement as a result. Let me go back to that in a moment. Yeah, no. What are my thoughts? Don't need it. It is, I even read it just this week by a nutritionist on Facebook who said all hays, like all hays, are going to be problematic, and you're not going to cover the horse's nutritional needs, and so you need to supplement. As hoof care professionals, as people who are at the rock face of dealing with hundreds and hundreds of horses who are sick, overfed, hyper-supplemented, hypernutrition, we have to say to you is you don't need it. Horses, if you've got mixed meadow hay, or you're mixing your hay as much as you possibly can, you don't need all the extras. You simply don't, do you, Garry?
No, and I think people don't understand that the plants are the cornerstone of the planet and all of us animals that live on it. And if plants didn't have everything in it, even if it was to create meat, where do you think all of that meat comes from? All of those meat animals that we use for meat, they eat plants. You don't need it. It's a misnomer. And a lot of the research that has been done into equine nutrition, all you've got to do is look at where it came from. Most of it has come from the racing industry. Now, whether you agree with racing or not, do you believe that those horses are kept naturally? And are they on a species-specific diet? Well, if not, how can we actually be learning from those studies? It just really doesn't make sense.
No,
it really
and also,
doesn't make sense.
No, you're right. And also the other thing is people, the amount of supplements people give, and don't get me down that whole road, but because I've got so much I could say about that, and so has Garry, but the amount of supplements that people give, what difference do you think that's going to make a 500-kilo horse or more, right? And you're spending a lot of money on this sort of stuff.
And also you've got these nutrients. There's loads of nutrients. What's happening when we're talking about hypernutrition and hyper-supplementation? You have no idea what those supplements, those vitamins and minerals are doing to each other in that horse's body. You have no clue. No.
So stay away.
Horses in nature would go and forage. They would forage for different plant species, whether that be for forage or even medicinal purposes.
Yeah.
They know what they need when they need it. We just need to simulate that as much as possible. But you can't do that with synthetic vitamins and minerals. No. Also, I think you don't get. We've covered it on the diet talk. That you're not giving enough credit to those amazing bacteria in the microbiome. They are creating a huge amount of nutrients in that hind gut. Huge amounts.
How many people
they get that?
Yeah.
Go on, Lindsay.
No, go on, carry on. I butted in. There was a bit of a delay. Go on.
But I've lost my train of thought now.
Oh no!
How many do you know how many nutrients that are made from the breaking down of this mixed species fibrous hay in the hind's gut? When you research that, you'll be thinking to yourself, well, why am I supplementing it?
Yeah, it's incredible. And
the hind gut alone, the whole vitamin B complex is created in the hind gut. All it needs is the right stuff going in the first place.
Oh, you're so right.
Meadow hay.
You give them the right ingredients, and the microbes.
Give them the right ingredients. The horse will look after itself.
How many people here feed biotin? How many people watching will supplement with a biotin supplement? How many people are spending money buying biotin and feeding, or a combination of biotin and other things? How many people here are doing that? I dare say there's quite a few. Rachel says biotin in the hoof supplement that I use. Biotin is one of the B12 vitamins, and it is produced in plentiful quantity, because you don't need masses of it. It's produced in plentiful quantity in the hind gut. It's one of the nutrients for the horse that the microbes produce. That is crazy and clever. But you start researching it and you start finding out these things, but yet you're told, oh, biotin's good for your hair, or it's good, keratin, it's good for the hooves. But in actual fact, they're not telling you that if you feed the horse correctly, a species-specific diet, species appropriately, then the microbes just do it for you. They just do it for you. I've seen a load of other things that have coming up. Rach said, yes, it's confusing. It's exactly what I've been told. Nicola Harris says also, Nikki says also the amount of water to use to soak is so much more than people actually use. Submersion in the water is not enough. The hay needs to be moved around. Yeah. Linnae Maritz says, and if they're on oat hay and concentrates only, stable yards, still not TB specifically. I mean, again, it's difficult, isn't it? If you're keeping your horse in a non-species appropriate environment, and we were coming along as your hoof care provider, and you were saying, oh, you know, I've got a few issues with guts, I've got a few issues with the feet, the footiness, the all sorts of things. I might have a bit of white line disease, a bit of thrush, a bit of this, that, and the other that I can't quite clear. It's a whole thing, isn't it? It's not just about can we feed the right thing? It's also about how we're keeping that animal. So for you, and if that is your only choice, then by feeding other things and concentrates and supplements, you're not going to make everything better. It isn't going to make everything better. What's going to make things better is choosing a better environment for your horse, which I know is hard. We're not saying everybody's got to go out and do it. It's difficult, but that's the journey that you're on, that journey that we're trying to encourage people to go on, that watch our webinars and spend time with us. Heidi says, I've read that synthetic vitamins, vitamin E, are better soluble for horse or people. Well, vitamin A, D, E, and K are fat soluble vitamins. They're not water vitamins. They are fat soluble, and if you feed them in excess, they can be stored in excess too, because the idea being they're stored so they can be used for later. But if you feed it in excess, you're going to have it in excess. Now, I did see somebody also mention something about selenium, because that's a big
Krista.
Yeah, that's a big paranoia as well.
Please?
Yeah, well, blood tests first.
Our horses are all tested. Yeah.
Are they tested? Did she say? What did she say?
They have been tested deficient in selenium and vitamin E on free choice meadow hay and minimal grass.
Yeah, now that's an interesting one, you know, because I would like to know what the effect is on those horses that are having that have been tested as having reduced or not enough selenium in their diet, because selenium has a very narrow window. Beyond that, it becomes toxic. It's much narrower than pretty much every other mineral, than every other mineral that we give to the horses. And that narrow window means that if we can easily overdo it, and we can easily make it toxic. Is it worse for a horse that is always having a selenium deficiency? Are we sure that they're always having a selenium deficiency? And are we looking at the animal and really looking at what that effect is for a selenium deficiency? Because if you go and research it yourself, it has this very narrow window, and there are so many products that have it in. Although I have to say, I am very doubtful that the amount of selenium that you might require if a horse was seriously lacking in selenium, you would find from your average off-the-shelf supplement, because they don't have to test or prove that they have a certain amount in their product, because that's the way the supplement industry works. So with that one, I'd be looking at the effects of this reduced selenium, and I'd be really looking into that in a much greater detail than just giving a selenium supplement, because selenium is a problem mineral, in the fact that it is one of the ones that you can become toxic very quickly. So it's important to really understand that with selenium. Tonya says, I just listened to a vet say last night to feed 3 times biotin when you want your hoof to... What? Lucy says, I don't give any feeds or supplements, but some friends think I'm mean. You're not mean. The horse isn't like, oh, I need that supplement. It's not mean. Anyway, we must move on. What about testing hay? Another big paranoia, another rabbit hole to go down, and something that in fact we discourage. Yeah, we'll hold our hands up, and we discourage this one too, because we discourage this constant obsessive thoughts about hay, when people really don't obsess enough about the grass. They obsess far, far, far too much about the hay when they don't obsess too much about the grass. Okay, we obsess about the species in the hay is what you should be obsessing about. It's almost about the same as people when they're obsessively taking digital pulses all the time. And I talk to owners about this, you know, and they're forever taking digital pulses. And I know that, noticed that Lucy mentioned that a few times. You kind of have to move away from that kind of thing, because it can make you do things that maybe you shouldn't be doing, because you're forever getting, you know, you're taking all these digital pulses all the time. So, right, let's talk about hay analysis. Let's talk about real proper hay analysis. If owners took the right core samples with the right equipment, because they have to take the right, you really should be using the right equipment. And they need to take them from a huge variety of bales, not just one, and ideally from different fields, if you're going to get a really good overview, because this is what farmers do, right? When they're testing, they don't just test from one bale or a couple of bales and take a handful. They're taking proper deep core samples. And ideally, you have to take it from different cuts if you're going to get a really good idea. If you want this appropriate comparison and evaluation, but you could actually just keep on testing quite literally till the cows come home. And then you'll get the hay analysis, and we've read so many hay analyses, and many owners don't understand how to read them, and they think that they're fine to feed this sort of hay at this time. But it might be different hay from different fields. Again, you just don't know. It all changes all the times. And many labs who say that they specialize in bespoke supplements, they encourage hay testing all the time. This is what they encourage owners to do. It encourages paranoia, as far as I'm concerned, and it encourages obsessive behavior. And then what do? They will then sell you what they deem to be an appropriate supplement to balance that hay out. And we have big issues with this, don't we, Garry? Because, well, we would, wouldn't we? Because we know, because how do they know what is appropriate for that horse in that situation? You've just sent them a test analysis, but they don't know the deep nitty-gritty of what's going on in your situation. We do when we turn up and we talk to owners really in depth about the way that they're keeping their horses. We know that nitty-gritty. That supplement provider who's testing your hay does not. They don't know what exercise you're doing, and you might be able to write some stuff to them, but I guarantee you're not going to be telling them everything that goes on with that horse every single day and week of the year. They don't know who they're mixed with. They don't know how much stabling they're getting. They don't know what other supplements you're feeding, because you're not just feeding theirs, you're feeding somebody else's. They don't know what bag feed you're feeding. They don't know what kind of other hay you might be feeding, or what hay you've got to feed if you can't get hold of that one. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like this massive overdoing of everything. And my belief truly is that most of these bespoke supplements are quite sketchy at best in terms of their differences in minerals, etc. And remember, they are not regulated, even though they say they are, these industries, they're not. They're, as long as they are grass, generally recognized as safe, then, you know, there you go. Shall we leave it at that, though?
I think we'll leave it at that.
So when all's said and done, you've got to know how to read and hay analysis, and they all change and they differ anyway. And all of this has come from the cattle industry again. You know, bish bosh. Don't obsess. If you want to obsess over hay, obsess over it being mixed species as possible, and that it hasn't got rye in it and alfalfa, and it's not a cereal hay. That's the thing you need to be obsessing over. Don't go obsessing over all the other things when you're trying to shut the door after the horse is bolted because your horse is overweight. Increase movement, give him the right hay, stop all the supplements, stop all the bag feeds, cut out the grass, and then you've got your answer to a fit and healthy, sound horse. And if that is difficult for you because you are at a livery yard, then his questions just need to be asked, don't they? You just need to sit down and ask yourself some serious questions, have some serious conversations with yourself, as we often do with many of the owners that go round and round and round and round chasing pathology and spending a fortune with vets. We help them change lifestyles. That's what we do. Okay. I'm going to come off I'll answer a few questions in a moment, but we're just going to come off this. So I hope you enjoyed it. We're not ending just yet because we'll answer a few more of your questions. Don't forget that there are more webinars free on schoolhmi.com. The Should You Feed Hay and Haylage is the one we've just done. The next one we've got coming up on Sunday, the 6th of August, is shoeless, the same as going barefoot with your horse, because we do hear a lot of people use the word shoeless, don't we? Because they don't want to use the word barefoot. But is it the same? On the 27th of August, we've got Are the Wild Horses a Relevant Model for the Hoof Care of Our Modern Day Domestic Horses? So many people say no, so many people say yes. So what's the truth? And then there's how to transition your horse successfully from shoes to barefoot, which I think is on the 17th of September. So go and register for those on the website, schoolhmi.com/webinars. Now, for those of you who've waited to the bitter end, if you want to get 20% off the Hoof Uncovered, which is 10 webinars in 2 series, over 11 hours worth of stuff to watch, all about the hoof, all about it. It's a deep dive into one of nature's amazing feats of engineering. And I'm just going to flash up the code now briefly on screen. Boom. 20% Hoof Uncovered. If you put that code into when you're in your checkout or in your cart, when you've picked up the Hoof Uncovered, you'll get 20% off both. It's only open until Wednesday, midnight, and then it's gone, midnight UK time. So if you want to get 20% off the Hoof Uncovered and go and watch this amazing over 11 hours of journey through the horse's hoof, then go with 20% Hoof Uncovered coupon and put that in the checkout, and then you'll get 20% off. Hey, that's it. I'm not putting it up again. Many thanks, folks. We've enjoyed it. We hope you have. We're just going to come out of this now so that we can answer some questions on screen. Oh, there we are again. Boom. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to follow Carol Hughes. I follow Carol Hughes' advice to feed plants which feed the microbiome. Yeah, Carol Hughes, she was also known as Dr. Carol Michael. She's the lady that was part of Phyto Origins, and she did work with Bangor University. And those are the people that looked at the differences between native species and rye species, all rye species, and found that rye was, no matter what it was higher than native. And they also found out something that most people didn't know, was that most grasses don't fluctuate that much during the day, even though we think putting horses out early in the morning and putting horses out at night made a big difference. She found that, or they found that they weren't. So that's some research you can go and read. Blah 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 blah. Don't give any feeds or supplements. Good. People think you're mean if you don't give horses grass. Don't worry, Lucy. My whole yard judged me when I got a nutritionist out. Do what's best for your horse and let them judge. Oh, thank you. I've never tested my hay, as it's impossible for me to do correctly. Neither do I. Testing my haylage told me what I already knew, that it was safe for laminitis, but it is great to show others a very low combined starch and ESC of 2.7%. It's obsessive behavior. It is. And we are trying to make your life easier and make your life better. You don't need to do it if it's going to fluctuate. It's not all going to be the same. But if we're helping our horses by increasing this movement, and we're taking out all the scary stuff and the grass, and if you're on a track, the grass around the edges of the track, because that can equate to a paddock if you don't control that. These are the things that you really need to be looking at. I'm obsessed with hay. Rach S says, I used to ask to put hay in my field when on a livery yard. The answer is generally no. Hey, I feel lucky to have my horses at home now. Yeah. Thank you. It was really interesting. Thanks. The Hoof Uncovered series is absolutely amazing. You will learn so much. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Nicola. Fran Knight says, thank you. You have allowed me to understand what I'm doing the first thing for my rescue babies. I hope. Yeah. And Linnea says, I hope I can afford it. Well, what you can't afford, Linnea, is you can't afford the vet's bills. That's what you don't want. And the increase in worry, you don't want that too, because that's horrible. Living with that every day and every night and trying to go to bed at night worrying about your horses. Don't do it, folks. Feed the right forage and everything will be okay. Do you think we covered it all, Garry, or covered enough? I hope you enjoyed it.
And I think, like we always say, you don't have to believe us. Just try it. Do what we say with vigor and just watch your horse thrive. If you don't believe us, believe your horse.
Lee says, hey, Garry, are they an original pair of Joe 90 glasses? Oh, that's not something to say to that's not something to say to your instructor, Lee.
Lee, I've got assignments to mark for you, mate.
All right then, folks. I hope you really enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next webinar. If you've signed up for this one, you'll get the recording and you can share it with your friends, and also you'll get notifications when the next one's coming up. But in case you miss it, I'd go and sign up. So thanks for watching, everybody. We've enjoyed it, Garry and I.
Thanks for sticking with us.
We'll see you next time, folks. Tatty bye.
Take care.